Today, Radical Personal Today on Radical Personal Finance, it's live Q&A. Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insights, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Joshua Sheets. I'm your host. Today is Friday, May 23, 2025. And on this Friday, as we do on, I can't say most Fridays because I've missed a few weeks, which is why this is now the third time that I've recorded this intro. We started off today and I had everyone muted out. Amateur hour around here today. So practice makes perfect. We got to keep that going. Today on the show, we have live Q&A. And as we do on many Fridays, in which I can hook up a microphone and have everything ready to go, we have live Q&A. You can call in, talk about anything that you want, ask any question, raise any topic of conversation. The direction of the podcast is yours. If you would like to join me for one of these live Friday Q&A shows, you can do that by becoming a patron of the show. Go to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance, patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance. Sign up to support the show on Patreon, and that will gain access for you to these shows. Got a great set of callers today. We had 7. One just dropped off. We'll see if he comes back, but we'll start with Timothy in Virginia. Timothy, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hi, Joshua. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I've got, I guess, a sort of real estate and home buying question. I was considering that maybe it's a little bit far afield, but I don't know that there is something that's really far afield in these calls, so I'll just give it a shot.
You got me.
I figure you've got some help for me. So, a little bit of background. I have 3 kids, aged 4, 2, and 3 months. I've been moving around the country with the Navy for a while. I'm a submarine officer on my way out of the service in about a year. My parents have a 25-acre farm back home in my hometown. My wife's family is also from there. Her parents don't live there right now, but they're moving back probably in the next, year or so. They're trying to get their way back. They were moved away for work. They're ready to be back. So the house next door to my parents is going up for sale. Now I forgot the question. I got so involved in my background. Okay. Maybe this was too much background. Anyway, house next door is going for sale. I'm hoping I'll be able to get it. If I do, again, I'm not moving for a year. My in-laws would like to rent it from me. So I'm trying to think, do I set up a standard rental thing? Is there some way that I should be handling this in gifts instead of rent? Both in terms like what's practical, obviously what's legal and not fraudulent, and also with consideration for, I think you can defer primary residence of a house you buy as a primary residence for up to a year, but I don't know if there's a problem of doing that with being if I were to have tenants, essentially, my in-laws who would rent it back from us essentially for a year.
Who would be interested
one
in
of the
giving,
questions.
So do you want to give them money?
Sorry.
Do they want to give you money? Who wants to give who money?
They want to give me money. We would be purchasing it, but not moving in for a year. In the meantime, they would be able to move back to where they want to be from where they are now. Essentially, they've been really slow rolling their home buying process, hoping to get the perfect house. So they would rent back from us, I think, basically for a whole year, the whole time it took us to get back there. So from a financial perspective, it's wonderful.
Okay. So if they're trying to give you money, then you need to just record it as rental income, and then they can give you money. So you could do it the other way. If you're trying to give them money, then so the IRS doesn't like, below market value rents. So kind of informal rents of, this person's staying here and, he's renting he's renting this house from me for $100 per month. But then over here, he's giving me a gift of $1,400 per month. That doesn't work well. So if they're renting from you, they're just going to give you the rental money and you're going to record it as income. If you're trying to go the other way, then what you can do is you can have your tenant pay you a market rent, and then you can just make a separate gift back to your tenant. That way, the tenant is paying you market rent, you're recording tax on that at all, and then you can just give them the money. But in terms of them renting from you, and them trying to give you money, you need to record it at a market rent. Now, I think the market rent, there's probably a pretty decent range of what an arm's length transaction would look like, generally for various services and different ways of doing things. So I think you can safely, I think you could safely keep the rent low based upon some kind of reasonable comparison to the market rate, but it needs to be a market rate.
Okay, cool. That's the first part. Second part of the question, the process of buying this house, I don't want to say it's gone south yet. I had hoped to get it from an off market. Now I'm a little bit worried about the purchase price and whether it'll end up in my hands. However, theoretically, on my parents' land, I could just build a house, 100 yards from where I'm trying to buy this house and have a house there. I don't know much about building, new custom home construction. And I'm wondering, do you have a sense, is it often a financially prudent thing to do, or is it more a thing people do because it's a passion project and they've got the land that they want to be on? Again, I've got 3 young kids trying to navigate a career change. Building a house would be, I wouldn't say off the table, but it seems impractical. But I was just wondering your sense of that.
I think if you're asking the question, you shouldn't do it. There are some people who have the skills and who have the interest and want to build a house in a certain way, and they should probably get involved in building the house. If you're asking the question, though, then you yourself probably shouldn't do it. I think you run into a whole host of issues. So again, if you have skills, so when I was younger, my dad was trying to build a house for his family. He bought a piece of land and he built a house. And he was trying to save money, and I think he genuinely, legitimately did. He's not a builder or anything, but he's a pretty capable guy. And so he contracted out the shell to a contractor to pour the slab, put up the walls, put on the roof, dry it in. And that was what he contracted out. And then my dad himself did a lot of the interior work, hired a few subcontractors. He hired a drywall subcontractor, hired a plumber. That was a catastrophe. My dad did all the electrical himself. We moved into the house when it was just bare concrete floors, and we put down all of the wood flooring ourselves. So, and he did it. At the end of it, he had done it. Did he save a lot of money? Yeah, he saved whatever the profit would have been generally for the builder along the way. But I think where you get gotten in a lot of those transactions is, number one, who do I work with? So you can hire a contractor, and I have a family member who's recently hired a contractor to build a house. A couple years ago, the contractor kept all the money, and now it's an absolute legal disaster. And so kind of that's the worst case scenario, is the contractor turns out, you try to do all your due diligence, and it turns out that the contractor is unethical, and now you've lost your money and you've lost everything. Also, of course, the financing of building is much more complex than the financing of just simply purchasing an extant house. So be careful it can be done with financing. Just be careful because it gets complex, and the contractor's protection and all that. So first of all is the issues with the contractor. Similarly, even with subcontractors. So a contractor will generally know who his reliable subcontractors are. And the long ago example of my dad, he subcontracted with a plumber, but the plumber turned out to be just a disaster. And the work was shoddy. Everything was a disaster. And yet he had to go through, and you don't know those things as an owner builder. So that's why you hire the contractor. And if you hire the contractor right, then the contractor builds it all fine. The other thing that can be really challenging is just simply things like fixing all the finishings, right? There's just an enormous difference in price that you're going to wind up paying for the finishings of whatever house. And as you're going through those, all the decisions on those are agonizing. Now, if you go to a residential neighborhood and there's a big giant builder and you say, I like package B with finishing set 2, then all right, you've got it. They've got it all priced out. It's kind of one thing. But if you're doing your own kind of custom home on your own land, you're going to be making nonstop decisions. And should I buy the $30 faucet or the $300 faucet? And it's hard to justify all those. So I think you'll find it a very tiring tiring process. I think in addition to that, the other thing is just usually there's all kinds of things that on the first home build that you'd like to have, and when you actually price them up, it's enormous. So the sprinkler system in the grass and the fence around the property and all of that, oh, there goes $30,000. Oh, there goes 40. It just adds up. So if you are really into it, and let's say you have the mindset, this is going to be my forever home. I'm going to build a 1,000-year house here. I have a clear idea of what it's like. I want to do this amount of the work myself. I'm willing to deal with this hassle. I'm willing to learn this. Then sure, I think people can do it. They do it all the time. But if you're asking the question, I would say with 3 young children, if there's a house that you can just buy and you know it's good things and you know its flaws and your plan is I'm going to buy it, I'm going to renovate the bathroom in a few years, then you'll probably be grateful for that rather than trading several years of turmoil in your life to just simply buy a house that somebody has built and deal with what's there.
Okay. I was hoping that was the answer. I found myself on Reddit yesterday looking up people's home building attempts and was just aghast at the terrible finishes and crazy design decisions.
Yeah.
One more quick one.
Yep. Very fast.
Are we gonna have any chance to hear any of the talks or content from the family camp? The topic sounded fascinating. Some of them I don't think I've heard you address before, so yeah. I'm hoping. I'm sure a bunch of us are.
So no, I will bring back a couple of the speakers and do some interviews with them, 2 that specifically I'll do more interviews here. But no, I of course could have recorded everything, but I really believe in the value of in-person meetings. And when you start recording stuff, you wind up with 2 bad things that happen. Number 1 is everyone who is speaking from stage speaks to a general audience rather than to a room of people. So when I'm speaking to a room of people, I can be much more myself. I can share more private details. I can be very genuine and authentic because I know that my exposure here is these, 65 people sitting in front of me. If I know that's being recorded and maybe played for the world, then I'm going to change what I do in such a way that I'm less offensive or I'm less edgy, I'm less personal, things like that. And so I want that to. So from a speaker's perspective, I want the event to be really good for those who are there. And then I want you to want to come. So it was a great event, and I want you to come next year. Right? And I want you to want to be there and to be in the room. That's the other thing. Is that frequently, whenever I go to a conference, if I know the talks are all being recorded, I just skip all the talks or skip 80% of them. And I go and visit with people in the hallway or go and do my own thing. And then I just listen to all the talks later when I'm driving in my car. And that is, while I think an intelligent conference strategy, I think that does a disservice to the speakers in many cases that you just know, okay, the point is just to record. So no, I didn't record them, and I purposely did not record them, meaning I don't even have the ability to play them, and I choose not to do that. So I like to keep digital topics for digital stuff that we know it's being published, and I want to keep in-person topics for people in the room. However, it was enormously inspiring. I have learned a lot from some of the people there. Our group, we have a group, a private group for all of the people who have attended the in-person events, and it has just blown up. We have been talking nonstop about some of those things. So maybe there's your ticket. You come next year in person, bring your children to family camp, and then that'll get you in our group, and then you can go back in the archives and see the the threads and whatnot that we're building there.
Okay. Thank you, Joshua.
My pleasure. Good talking to you. Next, we have Andrew in Minnesota. Andrew, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today, sir?
Hey, thank you, Joshua, and thanks for all that you do. Quick follow-up question from one probably 12 to 18 months ago. I started a YouTube channel per your recommendation. I was originally kicking around the idea of starting a podcast, and you directed me towards YouTube for easier marketing with the algorithm, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the niche or the topic that I chose was kind of personal finance, real estate investing, because that's what I could speak to off the cuff. But it has lost its glamour from that it once had when I was learning all the things per se. And went kind of Mr. Money mustache process-esque per se. And I'm finding that niche is fairly diluted, or else it's challenging for me to make a monetization strategy. And part of that is just me not being as consistent as I should be, just due to prioritizing personal life things and a few rental projects. I'm considering, so just kind of a general question, and I'll maybe zoom in a little bit, but I have a background in project management and engineering, and now a year of YouTube experience under my belt, and I've started to get to know the algorithm, but definitely not an expert after 1 year. And I'm just trying to find an online service-based business to pursue, and just curious if you have any recommendations. And I guess a little more context would be the goal to scale it to an income of 100,000 to mid six figures. I mean, scale it over time, but get to that 100,000 over a couple years. And I had went to FinCon to just kind of talk to people in real life to get some more realistic expectations, and most of them said like after about 2 to 3 years you should be making that if you're committed to it. So just curious if you have any
What are you selling to your audience at the moment?
Yeah, so right now I'm not selling anything, which is and because I've been very inconsistent recently with work demands and stuff. So I know a lot of the problem is just that I'm not selling anything per se.
Okay. So I would say I would give you just 3 suggestions, first and foremost, that I think will give you the categories that you need. First, it's important to keep in mind that I would say the idea of being able to start from nothing with no skills, no experience, and create a business that makes 6 figures in 2 or 3 years is very, I don't want to say...
You can say unrealistic.
Well, I don't want to say...
that's fine.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say unrealistic because it's not impossible, but it is improbable. So let's just deal with reality for just a moment. The median wage in the United States is $50-something thousand per year. Median household income is $80-something thousand per year. So a $100,000 profit business, while possible and admirable and doable, I would it can be done. That is double the median wage. So we're not talking kind of lightweight stuff here. Putting it into perspective, that's double the median wage. That's a significant thing. And then to start, as I said, with no experience and no background, no skills in that area. Think about your average career that takes you, 4 years you got to go and study for 4 years or do several years of on-the-job training. Just an average career, especially one that creates $100,000, would certainly require 3 or 4 years of schooling, training on the job, things like that to get to. So I think it's silly to imagine that somehow I can just roll up on YouTube with no experience and be able to make a bunch of money in 3 to 4 years. That's improbable at the highest. The people who do that and who are successful very quickly usually have a background that you may or may not be aware of. So I've always tried to be explicit about those things, right? But when I started my podcast originally, I made $100,000 within 3 years. I think it was right between 2 and 3 years. So I made $100,000 within 3 years. I also, at that time, had been a public speaker for many years. I had practiced communication skills consistently for many years. I had been a professional financial planner for 6 years. I had been interested in personal finance, nay, obsessed with personal finance for about 15 years. I had a long, I'm trying to learn not to correct every mistake I make. So I had I had many years of interest in this. And when I brought all that to a microphone, it kind of worked. And I hit a timing curve nicely. So I didn't become an overnight success in 3 years. It was a decade and more of knowledge, of thinking about it, and becoming strongly opinionated, having that, and then just a good, healthy dose of luck. So in the video space, if somebody shows up and all of a sudden is a great storyteller, what you need to check out is try to figure out, well, is this the 6th YouTube channel the person has started? In many cases, what I find it is. Or has the person been making home videos for 20 years? Yes, he has. Or has the person this deep knowledge base? Yes, he does. And so there is always some magic ingredient to a particular content creator, video creator that you are really admire. There's always some magic ingredient that comes with a depth of experience. You know, I watch off and on Peter Zeihan. Okay, Peter Zeihan is a geopolitical analyst. His YouTube channel blew up when he finally started one. He films every one of his channels on an iPhone while walking through the wilderness. There's no production, there's no editing. It's just him holding his iPhone while hiking through the wilderness, talking about geopolitics. But that is the capstone he's written 4 books on the subject. He speaks professionally on the subject and has for many years. He's consulted. He's spent 10, 15, 20 years working for institutions, things like that. So for him, the magic to a YouTube channel that blows up is just him turning on a camera. But it's the depth of knowledge. For you, it may be you may have a deep knowledge, but maybe you're not. Maybe you can't articulate that impressively. So you may have to find some other thing. There's some creators I watch who are really unique, and they bring production quality in some cases. They bring background knowledge. You got to figure out what is that I bring, and it's going to take some years. So while possible to make $100,000 in 3 years, I would say it's improbable, and it's also statistically improbable that you will do it with your first attempt. So you will do something with this particular brand, and then maybe it'll be a different brand. And then the third time around, with the third thing that you try, you might hit a sweet spot, or you might not. So that's the first thing. Number 2, you should control what you can control. I know all about being inconsistent. My podcast production frequency over the last few weeks last 2 months has been highly inconsistent. I do not like that at all. There are a lot of reasons for it, about 70% of them valid and about 30% of them invalid. But my point is that when you come to this call and you know, okay, I've been inconsistent, you know that YouTube rewards consistency. The algorithm likes consistency. And so you have to fix the things that you know to fix. You have a list of things that you know to fix, and you have to do the things you know to do before you start to go and figure out other things on top of that. So fix the consistency, or fix the things that are there. Then next point I would make is, if you want to make money, your obvious solution, and to be clear, I'm not yelling at you. I am telling you from experience, from the mistakes that I have made. If you want to make money, you have to have something to sell. And making money on placed YouTube ads will not work until or unless your channel is very large. And so what that means, we'll go find the YouTube gurus and see what they say. But if you want to sell something, if you want to make money, you have to sell something. So you have to create a package. And there are lots of channels out there with some hundreds or a few thousand people who look at them who make, and the creators make $100,000 a year. But that's because they have something that makes sense in the context that they're working in. Usually, the most obvious solution is personal services. If you can sell personal services of some kind, then boom, you can make some money. If you can sell products, of course, digital products have their place, then you can do that. If you can create brand collaborations or something, go through the 11 different, lines of revenue. But the point is that you already know that, right? You know consistency is needed, and you know if you're going to do it, then you need to have something to sell. You're not going to make it with YouTube ad sharing until your channel is quite large. And then the final thing is, I would say, you have to remember where we are. So based upon where we are in the cycle of products and content. So the way you described your YouTube channel, I have zero interest, other than the fact that you're my listener, but I have zero interest in looking at your YouTube channel, because you said, well, it's about personal finance and real estate. And so the secret to making it interesting is to create a hook that could that could do something. This is standard advice, right? But no longer can you start the personal finance YouTube channel. If I today started radical personal finance, I would flat out fail because the market is enormously crowded for that real estate, and so it would not work. But what you could do is you could create a YouTube channel that is focused on personal finance techniques for new fathers, so that by the time your son is 18 years old, each of your children, your son and your daughter, for every one of your children, you will have a paid off house at the age of 18. So if you came to this show and you said, hey, Joshua, I have a YouTube channel, and what I do is I teach brand new fathers or let's make it better, right? I teach stay-at-home moms who've just had a baby how they can handle their family's finances so that each of their children on his or her 18th birthday will have a paid-for single-family house. Well, boom, I would be super interested in what techniques you have for that. And so you've got to find something that's not just generic personal finance and real estate and really engage with that so that people want to watch, convey that, and then over time you can expand from there. So those would be my suggestions for you to consider. And then don't be scared to change. So the good thing about having something that hasn't worked is, let's say you put a year into this, no one subscribed to your channel, you have no views, you've learned a huge amount. You know way more about the whole process Absolutely. Now. So take that year of experience, ask yourself, is my original concept still good, or do I have a better concept? Now you know how to run a camera, now you know how to edit, now you know how to upload, now you know how to tag, now you know how to do stuff. So try option 2 now and just launch a new channel and see if you have a different hook and do the whole thing over again, but now with a year of experience and skills.
Yeah. That's excellent. Some initial thoughts. First off, I'm mature and I know that you're not yelling at me, but I guess I'm somewhat asking for air quotes permission to shift niches, because I feel like I am too general and I'm just not passionate enough to just like talk to go be Graham Stephan or just talk like broadly per se.
Yeah.
And so I can see the lack of traction, and I just feel like I want to shift. And so like I'm a project manager for a consulting company, and so I've thought about doing Notion or Monday.com tutorials, because I feel like I'm a good project manager. I make, I don't know, 150, 170 a year probably. I forget exactly, but so it's like I am very proficient at that, and I don't regularly use Notion or Monday.com, but I think in 3 months I could pick them up and leverage my project management skills. So I think I may shift to that niche, which I think would be easier to monetize. Or I like what you're saying about niching down within the real estate or personal finance space.
Yeah. Remember also that if you do choose something related to project management that's related to your day job, then the way that you make money on the day job may be that you get a better day job. And I think that's really important. So I've shared this story before. Yeah. I'm going to keep a few details loose, but I had a friend of mine who was he was an accountant and involved as a financial officer in the world for a Christian missionary organization. And I persuaded him over time. He had some ideas, and I persuaded him to start a podcast. And he started a podcast. I think he recorded something like, I don't remember, but less than 10 podcast episodes. And basically, he had spent his whole life around the world of accounting and finance and such, and he had a conviction related to the specific role of a financial manager in the space of like Christian missionary organizations, etc. He saw it as really valuable and important. And he released this podcast. And I would be surprised if he ever had more than a few dozen listeners to his podcast. However, a couple years later, he gets a call and somebody says, hey, I'm a representative for insert very large Christian missionary organization. We are looking for a CFO and we'd like to fly down and interview you for the job. So team flew down, interviewed him for the job, made him an offer, and he accepted. And today he is the CFO of one of the largest organizations with a huge amount of responsibility. And so his podcast was extremely profitable for him, but he never made a dime from the podcast itself. All of the profit came from from his reputation. So I think that if you can take these skills and you can put them into something that you have a personal connection to, then that would be your way of profiting and would be very intelligent. So consider that as part of the overall plan. All right, move on to Joris from the Netherlands. Joris, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hi, thank you. I think I have a good subject for a call in regarding personal finance, family, and also internationalization.
Great.
I'm currently 29 years old and live in the Netherlands. And shortly I will be with my girlfriend for almost 1 year. We're already very close and intend to stay with each other forever, I guess. And
Wonderful.
she is currently accepting a job in law, and the first year she will be working in New York, in America, and she will return to Amsterdam after that year to finish her practical education. And so I'm kind of wondering what my position will be in the next year from September. Because we are not partners in any official way, so visa is not in the cards for me. There's the ESTA program. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Very much so.
I'm currently working on a business for myself and have a job in the same field that I'm quite happy in. And I currently see kind of three options. Keep working at my current company, take some kind of paid leave, and combination with unpaid leave. We have a lot more vacation days in the Netherlands than most American people do. So that is kind of a feasible option. I could also quit my job and start working from the US, and this would require us to marry or get in another official partnership, or look for a job in New York. And I'm thinking, since I'm not really that familiar with the job market in the US and the ways about internationalization, that what kind of recommendations you would have, and or what your vision on this would be.
When do you plan to marry her?
That's a good question. I think in 1 year I would be ready to.
And what would cause you to be ready in 1 year?
I think this thing has been coming for a while, but it wasn't really sure of how it would be, how it would develop, if it would happen. The New York thing. We are currently not living together. She lives in Amsterdam and I live in the east of the Netherlands, which is 150 kilometers. But we see each other weekly. I think, I don't really have a hard explanation, but maybe a little more time or more time together. A serious or big vacation, maybe. Some things out of the ordinary.
How old is she?
I guess 25 currently.
Okay. So I ask that question, and I'm filled with understanding for what it's like to be 29 and 25, and I'm filled with understanding for what it's like to not be married and to have a sense of uncertainty about it. I can very much remember when my now wife, before we were engaged, when I was considering and you're thinking about how would I know when I'm ready to be married? Is there anyone, like, do your parents talk to you about here's how you know when you are ready to marry, or do you have other men around you who talk to you about that topic?
It comes up sometimes, yeah.
And what advice did they give you?
Well, they have all been living together before that for quite a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite a big difference. And there's not really they haven't really have given any practical advice on it.
Okay. All right. So I'm here, right? I'm an older man now, and I'll give you that's what I want to share with you is some practical advice, because I think that this is the answer, not necessarily a technical answer. So I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you first. So let's contrast two different cultures. So the first culture will be a traditional, in our context, meaning you as Dutch and me as American and my Dutch heritage and all that. In our traditional Christian culture, we have a traditional, so religion is important, meaning, Christian doctrine, what shaped the culture, but also remember that this aligns with virtually all traditional cultures, even across religious lines, is that there has always been a clear progression of relationships. A quote I read recently that I've come to really like is that tradition is, oh no, now I'm going to butcher it. Hang on, let me pull up my note. I keep a note called Pithy Sayings, and I want to get this right. Okay, here we go. Traditions are experiments that worked. Okay, so
right.
That's what tradition represents. If we think about cultural evolution, if we think about whatever traditions there are in your culture, a tradition can be thought of as an experiment that has worked reliably and consistently for many people over time. So if we were to go back 100 years in traditional Dutch culture, then you and your girlfriend, there would be a traditional progression of relationship. You would be interested in one another. There would be so you would be interested in one another. You have feelings for one another. You notice each other. There's a period of time in which you are considering her. Is she a suitable wife? Do we match well? She is considering you. You would get to know each other in some context. That varies among cultures. Sometimes it was the town dance. Sometimes you would get to know each other at church. Sometimes you would get to know one another at, in ice skating around Amsterdam. There are you would get to know one another, and then when the time is right, then you would make a decision that this is the girl that I want to marry. You would approach her father or whoever the authority figure is in her life. You would propose to her. If she said yes and accepted you, then very quickly your community would help you to plan a wedding. You would plan that wedding very quickly. You would enter into the wedding, and then you would be married. So there was a clear expectation of the relationship advancing step by step through these stages. And your duties and responsibilities at each stage in your traditional culture were laid out clearly for you. So generally speaking, it was your job to initiate the relationship, to become her suitor. Of course, she would have some womanly way of dropping her glove and catching your eye if she was interested in you, but you would need to initiate it. She would need to maintain her propriety and her decorum. She would need to not be a hussy and pursue you, but she would need to be open. And that was basically the gauntlet that you as a man had to run through. And then you had all of her elders in her life that were involved in some way, her pastor, her minister, her father. This was the gauntlet that you had to run. And so those men were responsible to protect her. Those men were responsible to make sure that you are not a loser, that you are financially productive, that you are not a deadbeat. And then you would not live with her until there is a clear and public profession of marriage. There would be a marriage ceremony. Marriage ceremonies must always be public, because that is when she goes from being an unmarried woman to being a married woman. And then you and she would move in together, and then your family would continue on that pathway. So this tradition provides a stable expectation for young men and for young women who are uncertain and unsure. And it provides you with counsel from all of the authority figures in your life. So you have your father and your mother and her mother and your minister and the man you work for, and all of those elders are very interested in helping you to get married. One of the things that I would tell you as somebody who is older than you is that as you reach a point in time and you start to have children, what that does is it changes your perspective. And one of my most important interests is to help a young man like you to marry well, because that is the foundation of culture. And I have a responsibility to the continuance of my culture. Having children fundamentally changes your perspective of the world, because now I have a 100-year timeline where I have to leave the world better than I came into it for the benefit of my children and grandchildren. And so that long-term thinking is something that when you have a lot of fathers in a culture, they will adapt culture and they will say, I need to make certain of it. Now, I can't change the political system of the Netherlands or of the United States, but I can try to find young men and young women and try to help them to marry well. I can counsel them. I can say, you guys are a good fit or you're not a good fit. I can help introduce them. I love to be a matchmaker. It's amazing if I can help a man or a woman find each other and enter into marriage. That's a wonderful thing that older people like to do, because we have a responsibility to do it and we see the impact on culture. So that's a traditional culture in the Netherlands, in the United States, all over the world has some variation of that. Every culture has some basic traditionalism. Now let's go to the modern age. So the world that you live in the Netherlands now, that system, unless you are involved in some way in a unique religious group that has that kind of culture still, broadly speaking in the Netherlands, nobody tells you anything and anything goes. Any man and any woman can do anything they want with anybody they want at any point in time, and no one's going to point the finger at you and tell you you're wrong. You agree with that assessment?
I think you're broadly right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So this leaves you as a man floundering, and it leaves your girlfriend floundering. Now, there are some nice things about it, right? It's kind of nice to be able to chase after the person that you want, but you always could do that. What happens now, though, is that you have to make all these decisions, and the society is not providing for you a framework. And all of those guardrails of tradition are now gone. So, as you stated, what do people tell you to get married? Especially in the Netherlands, especially across much of Western Europe. At least you're not in Sweden, right? There it's catastrophe. But in the Netherlands, they'll say, well, why don't you guys live together for a few years and kind of try it out and see if you're compatible. And then at that point in time, if you want to get married, then you'll get married. But we know from the data that is broadly available that every alternative pathway to the traditional pathway that I described is inferior. Obviously, I shouldn't have to make stupid disclaimers like this, but obviously there are individuals who can come through that successfully. So you probably know somebody who found a girl, went and shacked up for 5 years, then said, you know what, let's get married. Then they got married before the government or their church, and then proceeding forward, they had some children. They're probably a lovely, happy couple that's older now, and they don't see what was so wrong about that. But if you look at the broad sociological data from across the world, what you will see is that doesn't work. Shacking up with your girlfriend before getting married massively increases the odds of divorce. So the reasons that people say to do this, well, after all, we've got to find out if we're sexually compatible. It doesn't work. The data is crystal clear on it. I would encourage you, Brad Wilcox, who is a researcher in the United States, wrote a book called Get Married a year or two ago. It would be a good book for you to read. You can kind of look at some of the data. He's very active in that space, trying to look at it from a sociological perspective. There are other resources as well. But my point is that everything along the way, if you want the outcomes of I want to be married and I want to have children, if that's your goal, you have to reject modernity. You have to reject everything that's around you, and you have to proceed forward on a much more traditional basis, because everything around you, of the culture around you, is designed to keep you and your wife at arm's length. If you get married, it doesn't mean much. There's a very high chance of divorce among that population. There's a very high chance that you will never have children, or if you ever have children, you'll have 1.2. That is why the Dutch people are disappearing from the face of the earth, just like all of Europe is disappearing from the face of the earth. Remember, traditions are experiments that worked. And so all of modernity and all of this modern culture that you are surrounded by now, this will disappear into the past in some form. It'll change, it'll adapt, but it is not adapted to reproduce itself. And so you should look with great suspicion on all of that around you and recognize that within a century, this culture will all be gone. My traditional Christian culture, or your traditional, Dutch Lutheran or Dutch Presbyterian culture, or Roman Catholic culture, whatever, our cultures will still be surviving and thriving in a century from now, and they'll probably look similar to what they are now. Modernity will disappear into the dust. It has no enduring power. It is a modern experiment that's been around for about 50 years. 50 years from now, it will disappear. So what does that mean practically to you? Strip away all that kind of big picture talk. I would encourage you to go in this pathway. So first of all, if you are unsure about whether you want to marry in general or do not want to marry, you should spend careful time thinking about that question. I'm assuming, because you said, I would like to be with this girl, that you are open to marrying and probably even want to marry. The second thing that you should do is, before getting engaged, you should think very carefully and ask yourself, is this girl the right girl to marry? Is she going to make a good wife? Will we be a good couple together? Are we compatible? Do I see myself as married to this person? That is the process that should take a long time. So if you are uncertain or unsure about her in some way, that is where you should pause and focus. Now, once you reach the conclusion that indeed this girl would be an excellent wife, she has all of the characteristics, the character, she is what I'm looking for, she would make me an excellent wife. Once you make that decision, I would encourage you to proceed as quickly to marriage as is reasonable. So if you're going to take this, and by the way, especially at 29 years old, we're not talking here 5 years. I would say, okay, maybe a year of getting to know each other. You've been with her for a year. You should know who she is. And you have the benefit of the fact that she is young. So, meaning 25, she's relatively young. She probably doesn't have a lot of baggage. If you were 39 and she was 35, then maybe you might need a little bit more time to finish doing a background check on her and figure out what trauma she experienced when she was 22 and to see if you're willing to go with it. I'm only being slightly facetious when I say that. I'm being quite serious. But at 25, you've known her for a year. You can pretty easily put together what her life has been like for the last 10 years. And you can ask yourself, is this a girl that is worthy of this is a girl that I want to marry? Is her background okay? Is who she is acceptable? Is who she's likely to be acceptable? So that should take maybe a year or so. And that's what we would call dating, right? We're visiting each other. We're getting to know each other. We're talking about our ideas and dreams. Then, if you've made that decision to her, propose to her. Ask her to marry you. If she says yes, then you are now engaged. And an engagement should not be very long. It should be, in my mind, 6 months. Now, if it's 7 months or 4 months or whatever, but I can't imagine why an engagement should be a year. The common reason that people say that my engagement should be a year is, well, I have to plan a big giant wedding. But there is zero correlation or impact to things like a big fancy wedding and the actual enduring power of the marriage. It would be better to go to the courthouse, get a marriage license, and invite all your friends out for pizza afterward and get married quickly than to sit around for years planning some giant wedding. Why? Well, first of all, there's zero possibility that you'll keep your hands off of each other, which means that you're breaking all of the normal all of the normal pathways that should be happening in marriage, right? In an ideal world, a man and a woman arrive at their marriage day as virgins. And on a biological level, this is absolutely fundamental, because if they arrive on their marriage day as virgins, then biologically their bodies will adapt to each other. And basically, what do they call it? The sociologists have some word for it, but like they will connect with each other on a very much deeper level than if that has happened, if they have been with other people throughout life. Now, that's hard in the modern day, but it's still the proper ideal, and will make everything about your marriage easier if you don't have a lot of baggage. In addition, the engagement period is a period where you stop planning your lives as individuals and you start planning as couples. And so when the engagement period is short, it is enough time for you to now make these decisions together. So if I had, as a married man, I never ever think about what I want to do or what my wife wants to do. I think about us. There is no longer you and me, there is us. And so if you are engaged to your wife, to your fiancé, to this girl, your fiancé, then you would be coming to this question. You would be saying, we are engaged to be married. Our wedding date is September 15th, and she has a job offer in New York. And obviously, if I can possibly avoid it, I'm unless it's impossible, I'm absolutely going to be with my wife. So I need to figure out what to do in New York. And everything is simple legally because we're married, and she can now get a visa for her husband, and you're not feeling pressured by anything, and you're planning together. And that's what's so special about marriage, is that when you are engaged, you now can open up all those conversations. And this provides safety for her and provides safety for you. So when you're dating, you're largely getting to know each other, but you're not talking too much about the future because you haven't committed to her. And if she were my niece or my daughter or something like that, I would say to her, why are you entertaining a man who is talking about us and he's not willing to commit to you? One of the things that many young men do that is deeply immoral in the modern day is they steal from young women some of the most important years of their lives by leading young women along thinking that there's a long-term relationship, when in reality the man has decided, no, I'm not that interested in marriage. I'm just going to enjoy hanging out with this girl and enjoy her pleasure for many years. So do this 2 or 3 times in a girl's life, and this wrecks her life. A girl's 20 years old, winds up 3 or 4 years dating a guy. Oh, boom, she's 24. Okay, well, she's 24. She can still attract a good husband. She chooses some other guy. Well, 3 or 4 years, he hasn't put a ring on it, and now she's 27. All of a sudden, she wakes up, she's 33 years old, and she's competing for guys that are... it's very difficult for her. And let's imagine that she wants to have children. Well, she's 33 years old, and now she's going to find another guy. He's going to take 3 years of wander along, and then she's going to marry at 35. And we want to be married for 2 years before we have children. And basically now, if she's going to have children, she has 1 or 2, and then boom, it's too late, not going to happen. So you cannot lead a girl along. That is immoral. And I'm not trying to put any specific time. I'm saying 3 years before engagement, far too long. Something less than that, somewhere in the range of 1 to 2 years or something like that, is probably reasonable in most situations. But of course, that would depend upon the individual people involved. But you should not be leading a young girl along if you're not moving to marriage. So I'll conclude here that what I would say to you, and you're welcome to answer it or not, but you could, whichever you like. But number 1, do you want to marry? You said you do. Number 2, do you want to marry her? You indicated that you wanted to be with her for life. So you've made those decisions. So therefore, the next logical step is propose to her, be engaged, plan a wedding date. And what you will do then is plan that wedding date around, the specific dates of her contract. And let's say that she had to leave in June. Well, that's too young. That's too long for a wedding. So you might plan a Christmas wedding when she's going to be in New York for the next 6 months. You're going to be separated. You're going to have a wedding in the Netherlands at Christmas time. And then after that, you're going to go to New York with her then. On the other hand, if she's not leaving to New York until 9 months from now, that's enough time. Get married and then plan a wedding, get married, and then you go and be in New York with her or whatever seems best. But until you decide these relational things, things and what the appropriate steps are, then all of the other options it's not even necessary to talk about them. You have to decide where you are in that process. And if you are not at the stage of proposing to her, you need to be very specific. Why am I not proposing to her yet? And you need to lay out very clearly, here is the fault that she has, or here is the specific fault that I have, and here are the things that I am doing. And then in hindsight, sorry for preaching so long, but the last thing is it cannot be money related. What I mean is that a lot of times a guy will have these vague things of, well, if I could just work for another year and save another $10,000, then this, that, and the other. There is no evidence that if you have a job, then aside from that, there is no evidence that there is any particular financial goal or number that should interfere with this process. The most important thing is character. Is she a woman of character? Am I a man of character? Are we stable and committed to a shared future? If so, get engaged, move towards marriage as quickly as is practicable in your circumstances, and then that will solve all of the other steps for you.
All right. Thank you for bringing this the focus into this. After listening to a lot of your podcasts, I can certainly attest that you are influential in my life with these intentions and also the subjects that you address. So I want to thank you for that, and also for tonight.
Absolutely. I'm glad you called in. Feel free, now that I've given you that speech, if you want to talk more about the specific things in New York and other versions, think about what I've said for a few weeks, see what seems best based upon your unique situation, and then call me back in a few weeks and we'll talk more about it. Because I think there's a lot to say about New York and whatnot. I think it'd be a great experience, but I don't think you should mix them up. I think you should make your decisions about her and what you want, and then it's your job as the man. You need to be the one providing the leadership. And I would think she's probably a great girl, right? I would think that by now if she weren't, you wouldn't be entertaining this. And so when I talk to young women today, I hear them express a lot of frustration with men who are wishy-washy and don't provide kind of clear leadership. So I bet you if she's a high character girl, if you propose to her in an appropriate way, and if you're there and you want that, then if you propose to her and then you just say, here is the plan, you've got this thing in New York, here's my suggestion, and work it out, she will be really grateful to have you at her side with her, and she'll have a way better time in New York with you there rather than, and the two of you just enjoying everything that's related to that, rather than her having to face a cold and lonely city without you.
Yeah, I think you're very right.
All right. Call me back in the future and let me know how things go. All right, guys, I got 5 of you left here. I will go as quick as I can. Ben in Miami, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hey, Joshua, very apt that I'm coming right after yours, because my question is about dating.
Okay. Great. Let's do it.
Dating, the concept of optimization and signaling theory. I heard you mention signaling. You haven't expounded on it before, but on a recent episode, you had mentioned about something you should optimize for physical attractiveness. I've gone back and forth on that. I have dated or gone on dates with a few females who have optimized for physical attractiveness. After a few dates, I realized that, some people, that's all they have, is they optimize for physical attractiveness. And then when I look deeper, thinking about future, family, even personality, some of these people who look attractive, they don't have much more deeper to them than that. And so I move on. That was an anecdote. The next is, you mentioned signaling. I'm 36. I'm financially stable. I travel quite a bit, and I'm still looking. But what do you mean when you talk about signaling and in dating, and how to do that without coming off as arrogant, whatever term you have there?
Right. So signaling theory is a psychological concept that basically indicates that the way that people perceive, like you need to consider how people are going to perceive you, because that first impressions count. The way they perceive you, right? Perception is reality. Now, those of us who are thoughtful say that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard. Perception is not reality. Reality is reality. And I would submit that you are wrong if you say that reality is reality. In reality, perception is reality. So the way people perceive you to be is how they're going to affect you. Now, when I was younger, I was pretty obsessed with frugality, and my pride would not allow me to acknowledge that people should that it does matter. So I recall, for example, I was a financial advisor. First car I bought was this old Honda Accord, drove it for many years, paid just a couple $1,000s for it. I really loved that car. It was comfortable. I liked it. It wasn't ratty. It was old, but it wasn't ratty. It was kind of a fancy version of a Honda Accord. And it was a really super reliable car. So I drove it for years as a financial advisor. And I thought, well, I'll take pride in the fact that I'm a financial advisor and I drive a frugal car. And I did that, right? And some people, a very small percentage of people, would say, well, this Joshua's different, right? He didn't show up in a flashy BMW or flashy Mercedes, and so therefore, he's different. He's probably somewhat trustworthy. And I actually, at the time, the way I would dress, I would try to downplay, right? I would wear a shirt and tie, but I would try to dress fairly simple. I see myself as a simple guy, and I never was in favor of kind of the flashy stuff. But over time, I came to realize, like, this is fundamentally holding me back. And I should have recognized that earlier, but I was too proud of my frugality. And finally, I realized this stupid old car that I love and I was planning to drive forever, this is holding me back. I have to change my car. Now, I didn't change to a Mercedes. I tried to buy one, and that deal fell through. And then I realized I don't like that stuff. I don't want it. I changed to an SUV. So I bought a big SUV. And my theory on that was, well, who cares about an SUV? Nobody knows if I drive it because it's an SUV or because I have a bunch of children or any of that stuff. And I switched to an SUV. And that made sense for me. And I still think that was the right move for me. Now, I had friends who embraced kind of the flashy financial advisor lifestyle, drove the flashy car, wore the flashy watch. They liked it. That worked for them. And that's what they should do. But what I immediately felt more confident pulling up in front of a client's house when I pulled in with my nicer, shinier, good deal that I found on a used SUV, rather than when I was hiding my cheap car around the block and kind of walking up, oh, this is your house kind of thing. Now, should it be that way? No, it shouldn't be that way, but it is, because perception is reality. So you have to signal who you are. Now, I thought about this years ago with regard to kind of being young and in dating. We're going to signal who we are. So it's probably easier for you and me as men. It's probably easier for us to think about a girl. So if a girl dresses in a certain way, imagine she puts on some super skanky dress, and that's what she walks out the front door for our first date. She walks out with some super skanky dress. She is trying to signal to you who she is. No girl makes any accidental decision on what she chooses to put on. She is trying to signal something to you. On the other hand, if you go to pick a girl up for a date and she walks out the door wearing a burqa, right? She's trying to signal something to you about who she is. All of this, she is telling you with her actions and her expressions who she is. So it's your job to read those signs and try to understand what is it that she is trying to speak to me. And so, for example, my wife, let me not talk about her, the kind of girl that I would be attracted to, what would she signal? Well, she wouldn't come out the door in a burlap sack. I think that's unreasonable. Nor would she come out the door in a skanky dress. She would come out the door in a beautiful feminine dress that highlighted her qualities, but in a way that caused me to think about who she is rather than about how toned her thighs are. She would do something that she thought I might like. And so I if she cooked me a meal, that would be amazing because she's showing me that she can create a beautiful experience for me or something like that. Not talking about a first date. I'm talking about whatever, but talking about things that go on over time. So what is our responsibility as men? Well, our responsibility as men is to think about the kinds of things that the kind of woman that we want to marry would value, and then try to project those things. So if you think about clothing, right? I'm not the kind of guy who ever wants to put on something flashy. I'm a pretty conservative guy, and that's just not my personality, nor do I want to make it my personality. So I'm not going to put on some, South Beach mesh wife beater with a gold chain. That's not me. But I can put on some clean clothes, and I can take thought, as I'm not a sloppy person. And I'm going to take thought and care with what I put on. And I'm going to choose whatever my personality is and my culture. I'm going to choose that. And if that means a flannel shirt, a pair of jeans, and a pair of leather boots, great. I'm not saying you have to put on a 5-piece suit if that's not your thing. But you should put on something that is your thing, but try to signal that I'm someone who takes care. Similarly, what are the characteristics that the kind of woman that you would want to marry may value? So I recently did a podcast that women should be looking for men who are financially able to provide for them. And so you having a newer car that indicates that you're probably not broke, owning a house, having, wearing a decent watch, wearing a decent pair of shoes, those are the kinds of things that can quietly signal who you are. So if you wear an expensive watch with your flannel shirt and pair of jeans and leather boots, she's not going to miss that. And that's going to indicate something to her about who you are. And so that's going to indicate some sense of financial stability. So in conclusion, I think our appropriate responsibility is to signal enough of who we are so that she can figure it out and be confident in the kind of man that we're likely to be without being strongly inauthentic. I don't like that word inauthentic because I don't think it actually exists, meaning that you have no authentic self. I have no authentic self. We change, we adapt, we adjust, we grow. So it's not like, this is the real me. The real me is the dude who comes out and hasn't showered in 3 days and wears torn up sweat clothes. No, that's not the real you. That just happens to be what you're wearing today. And you can be just as much you if you look presentable. We can change, we can adapt, and we should when there's a reason to do that. But what we should be thinking about is not trying to signal something that is not true to who we are or to our vision of who we are to become. So if you really like to travel and that's your thing, then you would not just say, well, I've just been dreaming of living in one house and sitting there for the rest of my life. You would forthrightly convey that to her with who you are and how you think about it. So in conclusion, my point is everything counts and perception is reality. And we want to make it, in a perfect world, you and I as men would repel any woman who is not a good fit for us and be magnetic in our ability to attract any woman who is a good fit for us. Usually it's going to take more than just the way you look or the car you drive, things like that. It's going to be the whole package. But we should be thinking about that, and we should be thinking about these things and trying to put together a general package, and that includes how we speak, what we say, what we're into, so that she will have the information she needs to make the decision about whether we're a good fit or not.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. As I remember and recall what the last caller said, and thinking about getting married, thinking about things like that, I'm old enough. And when I go home, my family, friends, pastor, all the people who you talk about to rely on to help, and that rightfully so, they think that marriage is the end goal. Oh, you should be married, or oh, why aren't you married? I'm 36. I don't have baggage. I don't have crazy exes. I don't have a divorce in my life, fortunately, but I'm old enough and I've traveled long enough to realize that when they say that I should be marriage, and maybe this is my negative side, but marriage isn't the hard part. At least that's what I've come to believe. I've seen too many of my friends get married and divorced and married and so many things. And I think people could get married whenever. That's not the hard part. The hard part is finding someone who you're compatible with, finding someone who you can get along with in the bad and the good. So that's, yes, I do want to date, do want to get married. But when they say that, marriage isn't the hard part, at least in my mind. It's the finding the right one, living the long term, staying married and committed.
Yeah, totally. It's better for you to spend the rest of your life as a bachelor than to marry poorly and, have a nagging wife. You're way better off to be single than to be with a bad woman. However, I think the flip side is that most of the things, the reason for the emphasis on marriage is simply that is the key thing that opens up so many other aspects of life. And so finding a girl and moving to marriage, yes, you don't want to do that too quickly or unwisely. And our society, one of the things I think a lot about, I'm not yet an elder in society, but I'm well on the way, is I think with my kind of microcultures around me is how do I make this easy for young people? How do I create the institutions that make this easy for young people? Because our society, as I was saying in my little rant in the previous call, we've broken so many of the institutions that used to make this happen for young people. Now, I think that we kind of the idea from 1987 that the way for a guy to meet a girl is to go out to a bar and find a pretty girl sitting on the stool and approach her. That was, I don't think it ever worked really all that much, but I think that was a very small window of time. So what is traditionally the key? Well, traditionally, and I believe this very deeply, I believe that it is my responsibility as a parent, as a father, that the marriage of my children is my responsibility. Now, it's not my sole responsibility. They are also in that. And I am not going to force them to marry or require them to marry against their will. But virtually all successful cultures in history have had some version of arranged marriage, or, I don't like that word, facilitated marriage. So that's the word that I like, is that my job as a father is to facilitate my children meeting high quality prospective spouses from our cultural group that will be a good match, and then to facilitate them spending time, and then to coach and counsel them through it if and when they meet somebody and are ready and are interested in moving forward. And so for all of kind of the elders in the audience, what I would say to you, the reason you are having such a hard time is that our presumably shared American culture has abandoned that, and that you are facing this as a man thinking that it's something that I myself have to do. And sadly and unfortunately, it is something that you have to do, but it ought not be so. It ought to be something that the community is helping you with, and that you are being supported in with a wide variety of events. And every culture has different versions of this, but it is our responsibility as elders to create events where young men and young women are able to mingle, able to connect with each other in good environments where they're able to engage, so that when somebody who has the appropriate qualifications catches your eye, you can move that through that way. And it's also our responsibility to kind of produce those. So I have sons, and so if I have sons and daughters, it is my responsibility to produce the kinds of sons that I would dream of my daughters marrying. And if I have daughters, it's my responsibility to produce the kind of daughters that my sons would dream of marrying. So I feel enormous empathy for you in today's utterly broken culture trying to navigate it. I wish I had more answers of how to do it, but I've done my best, and I'm doing my best to try to learn anything I can that may help, because we need financially stable, good quality men to find great, good quality women and build families that will endure.
Great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for calling in, Ben. All right, we go to George in California. George, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hey, Josh. Thanks for doing this. I'm pretty new to you. I was recommended to join this from a friend, and I've listened to only one podcast, but I hear
welcome.
You're a very wise guy.
Oh, thank you.
So I really enjoyed listening to your answers from the last two callers. It is a concern of mine as well, although that's not why I called today, but those are very insightful. So thank you for talking about that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, but so I'm calling today because I have a dilemma regarding, I have a job situation. I'm 26 years old, considering switching jobs. I just want to know, what are your thoughts and what should I consider when it comes to, switching jobs and making a move? Currently, my work situation is not the best. I feel like there's no room for growth. I feel like I'm working with a toxic manager, and I might have an opportunity opening up. Just got done with my 5th round interview with another company. It'll be about an hour further from me commute wise, but I feel like it would be a better opportunity, potentially more pay, and potentially a better management. So I just wanted to get your thoughts, if you have any.
Sounds great to me.
And I can provide more context if you want.
So sounds great to me. Why would you not just take the job?
So I work for a very established company right now, very prestigious in the industry. The company I would move to is a lot smaller. And I also worry that, I worry about commute time. The start time would also be earlier. I'd have to get in by, 6 a.m. at the latest. And also, I think maybe at the current company, I think over the long term, if I can endure, the pay would be a lot more. And I just feel like there's a lot of uncertainty if I made the move to the new company.
The pay would be a lot more at your current company.
If I can kind of endure the situation and, fix the relationship and, get out of the toxic situation, which I don't know how probable that is, but if it's possible, then I feel like the longer term prospects at the current company might be better.
What industry are you in and what's your job?
Finance.
Okay.
I work on the trading desk.
Okay. So a couple of kind of big picture things just that I think are good, useful guardrails that make sense. Number one, at 26 years old, and I presume single from your leading comments, it
Correct.
really doesn't matter. And like you can do whichever. It really doesn't matter. It used to matter a lot more, but today it really doesn't matter. And whichever decision that you make will probably be fine. It's very easy when you are young to have this idea that, well, this is the decision that's going to be the driving determiner of my life. And in reality, it's not. So you can go either of these pathways. You could stick with your current company. You could try to resolve the bad relationship and try to move there. And a year from now, you could get a different job and go and, launch from there. This job is not the end. On the other hand, you could jump to this new job. You could be there for a year, and it turns out it's a piece of junk and a terrible job, and you were totally wrong, in which case you'll pivot back. You'll either come back to this company and say, hey guys, I made a mistake. Can you hire me again? Or you'll go get another job. And at 26, that's very normal. No one is judging you for it. We're all understanding it. And the goal is you're building experience with each of those things. Now, the goal is not to be a jumper, but you do need to have experience and pursue different things. And transitioning from one company to the next is really, in many ways, the key winning skill right now in terms of increasing your income. And so ordinarily, it is something that I recommend. If you are at your current company, and you're getting your annual review, they're going to do something like give you a cost of living increase, hopefully, and then they're going to give you some kind of increase based upon your performance. What that number is, I don't know. What would you say is a dream, based upon your experience in the workforce? What's the biggest raise that if you got a raise at the end of the year, you could imagine your current company giving you?
Ideally, I would get promoted, and it would be a 30 to 40% increase in pay. That would be, that would be ideal.
Right. So that would be ideal. And that would be a big increase in pay. In my mind, I was kind of anchoring it to 20%, meaning that most people see their employees a certain way and they peg you as this. And, a 20% pay increase would usually be kind of a dream pay increase. Point doesn't matter, though, because what you can do now is you can go and you can look for a job that pays double what you're making now. You can figure out the qualifications for that job, and then you can systematically over the next 2 years qualify yourself for it. And then you could figure out the connections for that job. And you can, over the next 2 years, build the connections that will get you into that job. And 2 years from now, you can be making double what you're making at a new company. But that's hard to do with your current company. Not impossible, but hard to do. So that idea of switching, qualifying yourself for a new position, and then connecting yourself to that new position through the relevant people, that is a proven strategy that results in big jumps. And so if you chart out for yourself a career path and you start off today at $100,000 and then 3 years from now you go to 200, and then 3 years later you qualify yourself for 300, and then a few years later you qualify yourself for 450, and then at 600, it's very reasonable with focused effort that 10 or 12 years from now you can go from 100 to 600, which is way better than going from 120 to 150 to 190 to 230. Right. And so it's very hard to make big jumps within your current company. So I don't mind you doing either one for that reason. You're young, you're kind of still learning, and you'll learn a lot from each of the situations. The other thing I would say is the commute. To me, why would you not just simply move to the new job?
I guess because I don't like that side of town. I mean, maybe that's not a strong enough reason, but that's my reason.
Yeah, so you get to pick. The one thing that does really cause frustration to people is having a long commute. Now, if you start at 6 a.m., you're getting your long commute when there's no traffic, things like that, that can be fine. And you can handle that for a couple of years, especially if you're single. You can make good use of it. You listen to all kinds of books and a great podcast called Radical Personal Finance that has more than 1,000 hours for you to listen to. You'll make good use of the time on the road. But in general, just move to where the new job is and snag a bedroom somewhere, snag a cheap apartment, and do it so that you can minimize commute time, because commute time is something that drains your energy, causes people not to like their work, and it's just not a very productive use of time for most people.
Yeah, I was also thinking, about the rent cost too. I mean, right now I have a pretty good deal. Living in Los Angeles, I have a good space for $1,275 a month.
Wow.
And I just feel like I wouldn't be able to find anything on that side of town for, under 2,000. So, saving money is another factor too.
Yeah. Make a reasonable decision there. Sure. So
yeah,
I would say what you should do is two things. Okay. If you're already on the round of interviews, do you have a specific offer for the new job yet?
Not yet, but I'm feeling pretty confident about it.
Okay. So you should work hard to get a new offer and then resolve the situation. So figure out who you need to talk to about the personal situation. Go to that person and say, how can I get this resolved? What can I do? And see if you have any hope that it's going to be resolved. And do that, tomorrow and really work hard at it. If it's not going to be resolved, then if you get an offer, then you'll go for it. I guess my point is, rather than my saying yes or no, because of course I can't know, you should generally, it doesn't matter all that much. And you should jump to the new job. I guess here's the last kind of framework that I would give you. You should jump to a new company and a new job when it is substantially better from what you're doing right now. Your current company, you have a few things going for you. Number one, you know the company. You know all the downsides of the job. You know the good things about the job. You know all the downsides of the manager. And you have some seniority. You have experience. You can negotiate the politics a little bit. You're a known quantity. Let's say that the new job offered you a 5% pay increase. I would never go to a new job for 5% pay increase, because there's a very good chance that you're going to discover a whole set of problems. You're going to have a toxic boss at the new company that's twice as bad as your current one, and all kinds of issues. Now, if you doubled your income at the new job and they doubled your income, then now you have the motivation to deal with a twice as toxic boss. But you don't know any of those things. So stick at your current job until you get an offer that is substantially better. And then when there's something that's substantially better and you're excited, jump to that. And just don't burn any bridges at your current company, and maybe they'll hire you back faster into that kind of higher level that you're looking for in the future. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate it.
My
Good
pleasure.
advice.
Glad you are here. All right. 3 left. Mike in Washington. Welcome to the show. How can I serve you today, sir? Mike, you are up.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you go. Now you got it. Now you're on. Welcome. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Hi Joshua. Long time. I've missed the camp this year, unfortunately, but
Bummer.
last year was amazing. So
Good.
hopefully I will be able to reconnect next time.
Wonderful.
Today I wanted to ask you about the framework of thinking about real estate. So we're considering to buy a house, and I'm trying to understand how I should think about down payment amount, given the interest rates are currently very high versus historical. People expect it to go lower, but no one knows for sure. So let me just make some round numbers for you for simplicity. So the house price is about 500K, and we currently have 750K in all assets. And so we have few options to consider. We can buy it full in cash, but it will be too much. It doesn't feel right, but technically speaking, it's possible to do. We can do like a normal 30-year mortgage and make the minimum 20% down payment, or we can do something in between, like make down payment 30% or 50%. So my current way of thinking was, despite the rates are so high, the average return from the market is still higher than that. So my current way of thinking, let's make down payment reasonably lower and then hope and believe that market return will be higher than the interest rate I will need to pay. That I was not sure that's the right way of thinking that, and I'm wondering if there's any better framework you could recommend to use.
Is your $750,000 of assets broadly invested already?
Yes, pretty much all of them.
So if you bought the house either in cash or even a 20% down payment, you're going to have to sell investments that you own currently to purchase the house. Is that right?
That's right. I have roughly 20% of that in bonds. And so my way of thinking, let's sell bonds now because they don't generate much return. I mean, they generate return, but I don't know. I was thinking more like because I need to sell anyway, let's prioritize selling bonds and prioritize keeping stocks because the future return of stocks should be higher.
And what is the mortgage interest rate that you think you would wind up paying in the current market?
Right now, it's between 6 and 7, so I believe 6.5 or so. That will be the rate.
Yeah.
But again, my perception, which I could be wrong, it should go at least a little bit down in the next few years. So hopefully, I will be able to refinance later to a lower rate.
Yeah. And why are you buying a house?
Because we don't have a house right now. We rent it.
And do you have children?
Yes, we have a small kid.
Okay. And so it's not necessary that I go too much down this because I'm fine with your buying a house, but let me just explain why I'm asking. Right.
Yep.
So you just ask the question, why am I buying the house? There's a big difference between I'm buying the house because it's going to make me a lot of money versus I'm buying a house because I have a child and this house would be appropriate for us and we want to own a home in this neighborhood that seems like place we want to be for as long as we can see into the future. Basically, in general, if we had to make a bet, buying a house, as long as you can afford it, is basically always a good idea. Is that guaranteed? No, but it's basically always worked out and always worked out pretty well for people. So the mathematical answer is exactly what you described. If you have, let's say that you could go out and you could buy a guaranteed investment that was going to pay you 8%, and you have a mortgage rate of 7%, what should you do? Well, you should buy the guaranteed investment for 8%. It's purely a mathematical problem. What if your investments will return at a rate that is higher than your mortgage rate, then you should stay and you should own the investments. If your mortgage rate is higher than your investments, then you should pay down the mortgage. It's always that way. It doesn't change. It doesn't change no matter what anybody says. It all comes down to rates of return. If your mortgage rate is lower than the rate of your investments, you should keep the mortgage. And the advice that flows from that is frustratingly consistent. That means, should I pay extra on my mortgage? No, you should not pay extra on your mortgage. You should put extra in your investments. You should invest at whatever you have the highest potential for. So why is it not so obvious? Well, it's not so obvious because we don't have 8% guaranteed investments. We have stocks and bonds and businesses and things that go up and down that might or might not produce more for us, and we have to deal with that uncertainty. So when we deal with that uncertainty, then it comes into play. On the whole, I think that if you have a good balanced portfolio, your idea that the stock market should go up by more than 6 to 7% in the long run, I'm comfortable with that. We know that that's historically what it has been. We don't know what the future holds. Some people think less, but I'm comfortable with that. I can't see it being much below that at the moment, but who knows, but so I would make that bet. I would go with minimum down payment, and I would minimum down payment to avoid mortgage insurance and to get a good deal on your financing and all of that, and just accept the 6 to 7% mortgage. So it always is going to come down to math. And if at some point in time you decide to change it, you can always go and take the money from investments and pay it down. All you're out is the points. Now, of the mortgage origination fees. I would be flexible. So most people who buy a house don't have $750,000. So if you wanted to change the math from what I have described, you would need to find some unique way to adjust things. So here are the common ones. Number one, you might find a house that cannot be financed, and maybe it has a foundation problem or something like that. So it can't pass financing. But you could pay for it, and you could have the foundation fixed, and then you would have a financeable house. So if you had a good contractor that looked at the situation, said, "Oh yeah, I can fix this," you might come in and buy a $500,000 house for $213,000 because they can only sell to a cash buyer. So that would be one thing. Similarly, there may be other things wrong with the house that also could factor in. The second thing you can do, the way that you can leverage your cash, is look for a house that has an assumable mortgage. So if you can find a house, and the house may be worth $500,000, and the current owner has a 2.7% mortgage, and he has $300,000 of equity and a $200,000 mortgage, well, I would probably go ahead and take $300,000 out of my investments, put down a $300,000 down payment in order to be able to assume the 2.7% mortgage. So most people, the problem with assumable mortgages is in order to assume them, you need to be able to buy the seller out of his equity. And so if you can find one that is a house you like and a super low interest rate mortgage, then that's when I would take money out of investments. There may be other strategies, but those are the two that occurred. I guess quick closing would be the third one, although that kind of gets uncomfortable depending on your tax situation. But if you have a bunch of cash and you can find a house where the seller's a little beat up and needs to close quickly, and you can make an all-cash offer because you have the cash, then you make the all-cash offer, you go ahead and close on the property quickly, and then you refinance it, take your new mortgage, and then you can put it back in investments if you want to. But just look for a strategy. The only reason I would put more than 20% down payment would be if I'm getting something that's really compelling, like a big discount for closing quickly, or on a broken property that can't be financed, or to assume a seller's low interest rate mortgage.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And honestly, I didn't know about a simple mortgage. I'm already searching online how it works, but you explained the summary, which is very interesting.
Yeah. There's a new website, a new mortgage startup that I really like. They're doing a good job, and it's called withrome.com. Withrome.com. And basically what they've created is they have created a system where they are grabbing all the data from the MLS, and they are specifically looking for houses that are for sale with assumable mortgages. And they're trying to pull all those out of the MLS, and they're using public data to try to figure out which mortgages they can, which houses they can do. They're in like 8 or 10 states in the United States right now, but and then they've put together a network of real estate agents who are trying to work with people to assume mortgages. But I'm really impressed with them, and they're in Florida, which is the market that I know, and so check them out, see if they're available in your state. They're only available in like 8 or 10 states, but for those who are, it's really powerful, and it shows you the numbers of what I'm exactly saying to you, where you can come in and purchase a house with a 3% mortgage if you can come up with a 50% down payment. Most people can't do that. So that'll be a great fit for you. All right, we go on to British Columbia. Welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hi, my name is Dallas Smith, and I'm wondering about how I would go about moving my family of 6 to the U.S. from Canada.
Excellent. You're likely going to need a job. Is just cut right to it. Do you have one, or can you get one?
Yeah, I could definitely get a job. I'm an industrial electrician, and I currently work at a local mine right now, so I'm making good money. I've been an electrician for 10 plus years now, so I've got a fair bit of experience.
Yeah. So the simplest way to do that, there are a couple of, just looking for some notes, because I actually just did a big research. There we go. Found it. I just did a big thing on this in my ChatGPT file for a friend of mine who's Canadian, who is thinking about moving to the United States. So let me give you just a couple of things. The short version is, if you can get a job where they can sponsor you and are willing to sponsor you for coming in, then that's going to be your best solution. And one of the nice things, and forgive me, I know a lot about immigration all around the world. I'm not super great on, and I know a lot about moving to Canada, and I know a lot about moving to Mexico. For Americans, I know a lot less for Canadians moving to the United States and Mexicans moving to the United States, but I know just a little bit. So Canadians and Mexicans both have a special visa option that is a simplified entry to the United States. So that if you have a job, I think it's called the TN visa, something like that. If you have a job, then you are able to basically to show up at the border, show them your job offer, and be processed in with a work visa as quickly in a much more convenient way. So the key thing is to be able to get a job. If you don't have a job, then you can try to qualify for, an immigrant investor visa or some other kind of investment visa that will kind of get things set up for you. But your key thing is going to be to have a job. There are also some business visas that are possible. What I would encourage you is, of course, there's lawyers, but I think here ChatGPT is really good at this, especially to do deep research. So what I did for my friend was, I use ChatGPT all the time, and their deep research is just fantastic. What I did for my friend was I just described his situation. I'm a Canadian citizen moving to the United States and blah, blah, blah. I described all the situation, and I got a really good answer out of it. So that's what I would encourage you to do, is fire up ChatGPT. Do a deep research prompt, and you could use others as well, meaning that go ahead with Gemini or Grok or whatever you want. I find that the deep research on chat is really good. And describe your situation in careful detail of all of the qualifications you hold, the licenses you hold, your work experience, that you want to go to the United States. And it will do a good job of laying out all of your visa options for you. And then with that, you can then take it and start looking for jobs. But that's going to be your simplest pathway, is to find a job where the American company wants to hire a Canadian. With that, you have simplified entry into the United States, and then you can work your way through the process. Be warned, I apologize in advance. The Canadian immigration system is much, much better than the American immigration system. The Canadian immigration system is straightforward. The details are clear. The process, it gets slow at times, but it's pretty good. All of my friends who go through the American immigration system, sometimes I just want to reach in and strangle everybody having to do with that situation, because it just seems like the most incompetent bureaucracy in the world. So if you come to the United States, just be prepared to be patient with the immigration system, that they're super incompetent, and I hope you have a smooth experience, but just be prepared to be patient as you work your way through the whole every step.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I was just wondering, because so if I get a job, it's fine for my wife and kids come along with the visa that I have for holding the job.
So yes and no. So I can't answer this extemporaneously like this. I'm sorry. I wish I had that kind of detailed level of knowledge, but I could probably ask you some questions about Canadian immigration you never have any idea about. So I know a lot about immigrating out from the United States. I know very little about immigrating into the United States. So as far as those specific details, I don't know. I don't know a ton. I can't answer them. I do know that there is a simplified visa route so that basically, if it is applicable to you, if you have a job offer in the United States and you show up at the border with the relevant things for, let me just check it, TN visa, see if my memory is right. All right. So yeah, it's called the TN visa. And if we pull up the U.S. Department of State, okay, so just the quick, as I did a search for it, how can a Canadian citizen get a TN visa? As an eligible Canadian professional, all you need is a U.S. employer to offer you a position to obtain a TN visa. Canadians do not need to undergo a lengthy visa application process to obtain a TN visa. Instead, you can apply for a TN visa at the U.S. port of entry. And so if you go to travel.state.gov, this is too long of a URL for me to read, but I'm reading a page called Visas for Canadian and Mexican USMCA Professional Workers. And so eligibility here is you have to be a citizen of Canada and the profession has to be on the USMCA list. So you'll have to review that list and see if your job is there for Canadian citizens or if you can find a job or qualify yourself for a job that is on that list, and then pursue that and see if it's there. So you're going to wind up working with a lawyer of some kind, and the cheap pathway for you to start with is with an AI tool. So I recommend to you that you go ahead and use ChatGPT. You're going to have to use a paid version that allows you to do deep research prompts. I think you get 3 or 5 deep research prompts with the $20 a month version, so you can start there. And so use ChatGPT, describe the situation, and have it give you the overall advice. Do the deep research prompts because it hallucinates a lot less than the other stuff does. And then take that information, see what you qualify for, and then you can contact a lawyer as necessary to kind of proceed you through the next step. Okay.
Awesome. Thank
Reddit.
you.
So also I spend a decent amount of time on Reddit, and Reddit will be also your friend. So if you go to Reddit, there will be communities. There's entire communities dedicated to what you're talking about. So you'll be able to find a Canadians, moving to the United States community, and you'll get good advice usually from that kind of from that. There's a Reddit subreddit called Moving to the USA, and that would be a good place for you to browse and start to learn a little bit. You have to wade through all of the Reddit junk, but that would be a good place for you to gather information on this as well. All right.
Awesome. Thanks. I think that's it for today.
Great. Well, we hope you'll come. I enjoy, we are Canadians and Americans. We have a high degree of compatibility. It's a shame the things that our countries don't get along on, but I hope that you can come, and I'd be glad to welcome you as a neighbor. Today, we finish it up in Virginia. Welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hey, Joshua. Thank you for taking the time. My name is Andrew. I'm calling because I'm interested in becoming a certified financial planner and providing financial planning services. And I want to know the best route to take to do that. I'm currently a CPA. I provide tax preparation and tax planning services. So I was curious, how could I do that in the most efficient way possible? I don't want to be a financial advisor right now. I don't want to be registered with the SEC. There's just a lot to do with that and a lot I'm not ready for at this time. So I want to know what services I could offer and how could I be prepared to all of those services, except financial planning or financial advising rather, that allow me to set up to do that.
Yeah. There's a group with the CPA board that has a bunch of kind of CPA CFP groupings. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Have you looked for that to see if have you looked for that?
I know the AICPA has like a PFS designation,
right?
Personal Financial Specialist. They say to get that designation, you need it looks like you need some financial advising experience. They give you a couple of years of tax prep, but you need some additional experience seems like doing the actual work a little bit. So where the CFP seems a little more general, so that's why I'm yielding towards that. I think all I need to do is take a capstone, and so I want to do that. I don't mind that. It's just more so as a practitioner, I just want to be able to provide like insurance services because I already have an insurance license, budgeting, maybe putting together like an overall financial picture. Of course, I wouldn't want to like manage people's actual portfolios and tell them what to invest in, but I just want to be able to provide as many services as possible. So I'm just trying to figure out what route to go to help me, and what could I actually do without running like a file and having the SEC on my neck. So to
But
speak.
you're not interested in working for somebody else. You're only interested in just continuing your own practice with your own clients.
For the most part, I don't want to work under somebody. I thought about starting my RIA and all that. And I probably will eventually, but again, that would entail me registering with the SEC and a lot of the compliance requirements with that. So I'm kind of like, I've tried to work for someone else before, like LPL Financial and some of these larger firms, but to onboard with them, it's a whole lot of stuff, and you know, it's a lot to onboard. And one case I wasn't able to just off of like having a role at my church or something. So it's like, it's little things where they'll not allow you to be an advisor. So that's part of my other reason I'm not even trying to go with somebody else, just to start right now, get these services I can provide that could get me closer to that industry. When I'm ready to, maybe I can start my own RA in like 5 years down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. So then it sounds like the question is primarily just, how do I get the actual designation? As you know, you can, as if you are a certified public accountant, you can simply challenge the exam. So you need to take a capstone course through somebody who is registered with the CFP, and then you can just challenge the exam. And so if you go through the textbooks and maybe a review class and whatnot, make sure that your financial planning knowledge is up to snuff, then you're good to go. You can just challenge the exam, pass the exam, and then you will be a certified financial planner. Being a certified financial planner, I don't believe will be, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't do it based upon what you're describing. I'm a certified financial planner, but I'm not registered with the SEC. I've abandoned all of my investment licenses. And so you can be a certified financial planner and a life insurance agent. I think that's no problem. You need to make certain that you understand the fiduciary duties that the CFP board imposes upon you. I don't think this is burdensome, but if you are selling insurance, then there are times in which you may be tempted to sell insurance on the basis of suitability rather than a fiduciary standard, and the CFP board is not having that. Again, I don't think that's a problem, but it does mean that you need to be very scrupulous with all of your disclosures and that your clients clearly understand those kinds of things. It's been super confusing over the last years to work that out, but they passed new regulations and they've gone kind of hardcore with their new regulations. And so just you'll understand that as you go through their ethics stuff and make certain of that. But I don't think it's going to be a problem for you, and certainly I think it'll be helpful. I don't know that it's going to make you a bunch more money or anything, so just think about that. If you found it bothersome, the idea of being registered with the SEC, then I think in many cases you're going to find it bothersome to do full and comprehensive financial planning. So if you're trying to put together a package for somebody to, here $10,000, I'm going to do a financial plan for you. You can do that, obviously, and you can get set up with the software and do all that. But it's going to, I don't know how it's going to work with your other practice, but I don't see any reason why you shouldn't go ahead and become a certified financial planner and then see if you've already got a busy practice and you can help people with that, then that would be key. That's an option for you. So I don't see why you shouldn't do it. You'll learn a lot.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's helpful.
My pleasure. Anything else?
No, that's pretty much it for now. I'll probably call another time.
Great, amazing.
Thanks.
I've always wanted to go in the other direction, go ahead and get my CPA. It's always the thing I like about a CPA, and what you should be aware of is that CPAs tend to be the most trusted advisors in the financial space. You are perceived as an accountant to have fewer conflicts of interest than I am perceived to to have in kind of the traditional space. And so I think there's very good reasons for you to want to leverage your CPA designation. The other benefit you have is that your clients are required by law to submit taxes every year, which means that most of them are going to see you every year. And so I have known financial planners who just went and bought CPA firms because it was a good marketing move for potential clients. So if you already have the firm set up, then I think that would be excellent. So if you develop a product offering related to more comprehensive financial planning, then that would be good. I would encourage you just to leverage into the tax plan, to push on the tax planning side of things. One of my frustration with the profession of accountants is I find it very hard for most people to get proactive tax planning advice from accountants. Seems like accountants are so accustomed to simply doing the work, and it's hard to do good proactive planning. But if I were in your shoes, what I would lean into is I would go ahead and become a certified financial planner, but I would just lean into really high-level tax planning and prepare a package of services that involved financial planning that is primarily focused on tax planning, and offer that proactively and try to get your customers into your office not only in March, but also in September and in July and in December, so that they can do really good proactive planning. And then I would leverage the CPA CFP also in terms of things like seminars and content and things like that. And so I think that if you have a customer base and you're a financial planner and you're a CPA, I think at the very least you should be hosting some seminars in November and December for your clients and going over, hey, here's all the end of the year tax planning things that you could do, and offering education. And I think that would be a really effective marketing strategy, because there are very few normal local professionals who are offering that kind of stuff. Mark Kohler has that market sewn up, because that's what he's done with his firm. But I don't see why you can't just take what Mark Kohler has done really well and then duplicate it for yourself.
That's a good point. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure. All right, man. Thank you for calling in. I really appreciate it. And with that, we wrap up today's Q&A podcast. I am so grateful that all of you called in. I love talking to you. Thank you for being here. If you would like to join me next week on a Q&A show, go to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance, patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance. I will welcome you there. Thank you.